Today for predictions versus reality, we're going to start talking about the NFC East, and we're going to begin with their last place team, the New York Football Giants, one of the league's worst teams overall. We're going to talk about where I had them in August, what happened to their season, what went wrong with it, and then we're ultimately going to ask the question, what now? How can the Giants actually get better? But despite how bad they were, this might actually be one of the more interesting teams I'm going to be following this offseason because of the position that they are in. But before we begin officially, all right, and welcome in everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic, fantabulous, awesome freaking day. My name is Garrett Shumake, and you are listening to the Shumake Take. Welcome in to Predictions versus Reality. The offseason series continues here with the New York Giants, like I mentioned. But before we officially begin, if you know what Predictions versus Reality is all about, you can go ahead and hit the timestamp down below and go ahead and begin listening. If you don't know what Predictions versus Reality is all about, I made scheduled prediction videos for every team back in August where I predicted where their final record would be and why it would be so. So we're going to look at that. And of course, like I mentioned, we're going to talk about what actually happened with their season, what went wrong, and then ultimately how they're going to get better or how can they get better. So going right into it here with the New York Giants, where did I have them in August? I projected them to go 5-12. Why did I have them going 5-12? Well, I had them going 5-12 because the roster simply wasn't that good. The only parts during the time when I made that video back in August, I said was the only thing that were good enough was the defensive line and Malik Neighbors. That was it. Daniel Jones, not high on him. The running backs, Devin Singletary was slated to be the starter at the time. I was like, no, he's not a starting running back in the NFL anymore. And then wide receivers, Malik Neighbors, I liked him as a prospect, very talented, but guys like Darius Slayton, he's just an average receiver. Wan'Dale Robinson, not that good. Jalen Hyatt, not that good, right? Although I did mention this offense on paper, right, at its best, could be a really good offense that's comparable to the Kansas City Chiefs. I made that comparison, believe it or not. But if you go back and watch that video if you want to, I made a really solid explanation as to why. Because of the skill sets of the players that they had, if they were put in the right situation, on paper, the offense actually would be pretty good. But it's the New York Giants we're talking about that are not good. So I couldn't say that that was a plus on their team. And then also, I just could not buy into the team overall. I'm unsure, and I'm still honestly unsure about Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen. And quite frankly, I'm just about out. The only person that's really holding that thing afloat is Brian Daboll. Joe Schoen, I wish he was fired. I wanted him fired after the year was done. But he is still here, so we're going to have to deal with it. Giants fans are going to have to deal with it. There was simply no avenue to me that this team would actually be good, and that came to be true, although it ended up being worse than what I projected. What actually happened here? So the New York Giants finished 3-14, one of the worst teams in the NFL, and finished with a third overall pick in the draft for reference of how bad they actually were. Their offense ranked 30th, which made sense considering that they don't have any good players on offense outside of Malik Neighbors and then Tyrone Tracy, who ended up becoming a solid player at running back for them as a rookie. So they had that going for them. And then outside of that, Daniel Jones, he got traded about 3/4 way through the year, or not well, at the trade deadline, I should say, technically. But that happened, and then a revolving door at quarterback started, and the offense simply was never going to recover from it. And then defensively, they finished 24th, a massively underwhelming unit, which on paper should have finished at least average, in my opinion. The defensive line, like I mentioned, going into the year, looked really good on paper. You have Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau. You traded for Brian Burns, right? And then at linebacker, you have Bobby Okereke, who is a good player. And then in the secondary, you had Adoree Jackson, Deonte Banks, who was going into his second year, which, you know, he didn't play good as a rookie, but people thought, you know, he was first-round pick. He's got upside. Then there's a couple other players in that secondary as well. Drew Phillips, a rookie, some people were excited about. So, you know, there was pieces on this defense for them to be really good, but they were pretty darn bad. And their best wins, to me, were at Cleveland, 21-15, in week 3, I believe it was. Then they beat the Seattle Seahawks 29-20, and probably what was their best win of the year. Second best win, excuse me. No, their best win actually came at the end of the year where they beat the Colts 45-33 in a day where they just drank something the night before that gave them superpowers, and they woke up and chose violence, and the Colts defense absolutely and for lack of a better term, crap the bed. Which, when we talk about the Colts later on in the series, in the Predictions versus Reality offseason series, yeah, we're going to talk about how bad that defense was. And allowing the Giants to score 45 points on you, oh, pretty bad. But we'll rag on the Colts later on when we get there. But for now, going back to the Giants, what went wrong with their season? So I projected them to go 5-12. They went 3-14. Their offense finished 30th. Their defense finished 24th. What went wrong with their season? Well, the first one, I'm going to talk about it here. It was getting rid of Saquon Barkley. Getting rid of Saquon Barkley and letting him go was the biggest mistake this New York Giants front office has made in years. Since probably the worst decision they made since benching Eli Manning a few years ago. Not even a few years ago, like 4, 5, 6 years ago. When was it? Yeah, in 2018. In 2018, when they benched Eli Manning for Geno Smith, when Ben McAdoo, if you remember that dumb you-know-what did that. That's the worst decision the Giants have ever made since that day. And honestly, this one was worse. This one was genuinely worse in a lot of ways. The moment he left for Philly, I think every Giants fan knew that this team was doomed. Because the 2020 or 2021 run where they made the playoffs, Daniel Jones looked good. The thing was, Daniel Jones was not the engine of that offense that made it work. It was Saquon Barkley. It was Barkley all along. Everybody knew it. And the Giants looked at these two players, Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley, were like, huh. Daniel Jones is our guy. Mr. Barkley here, you are the backbone of this offense and made everything work. You know what you're going to get? The franchise tag. And then Saquon Barkley was like, okay, fine. Played on the franchise tag. The team was bad because Daniel Jones is a bad quarterback. And then 2023... Was it 2022 where that happened? Yeah, 2022 is when they made their run. And then 2023 wasn't that good of a year. And then going into 2024, they were like, well, let's not re-sign Saquon Barkley. He's not that good. We'll let him go somewhere else. Then he goes to Philly. And then people start talking about, the division rivalry there. And then next thing you know, Saquon Barkley has a Super Bowl ring and ran for 2,000 yards. So, yeah, this was a big mistake and the biggest mistake the New York Giants have made in their franchise, one of the biggest in their franchise, maybe not the biggest, but one of the biggest ones. So that's the first thing that went wrong with Saquon Barkley, all rambling aside. The second thing was Daniel Jones was done. He is not a starting QB in the NFL. I have stood by that ever since 2021, right? 2021, 2020, not 2022, no, 2021. Yeah, 2021. After year 4, I was like, yeah, no, I'm out. I don't like Daniel Jones. He was a reach when he was drafted. There is literally a reason why so many videos of the Giants fans complaining about the pick circle around the internet even to this day. It's because they even knew how bad of a pick it was at the time, and everyone else knew it as well. And the New York Giants were like, this guy is the future. He talked with Eli Manning. Eli Manning really likes this guy. Let's take him. And then look at where they are now. Not a team. They traded him away for nothing. And now the Giants have, at quarterback, nothing. And guess what? All those years they spent on Daniel Jones, where did it get them? One playoff appearance, one surprise playoff win against the Vikings. I'll give them the credit. They did get a win there. And then what happened in the divisional round? They absolutely got destroyed by their division rival, the Philadelphia Eagles, en route to their first Super Bowl appearance with Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni over there. But injuries was the third big thing. Injuries did play a big factor in this one. And you look at all the starters that went to injured reserve, and you can kind of see why they lost so many games, and especially a lot of the starters on defense that led the team in major statistical categories. If you look, they only played 12 to 13 games most of the time. And so you mix that with the fact that this team has terrible depth all around on their football team. You get your offensive line that's already not that good being garbage once again. You get a defensive line that was super hyped up going into the year, really underwhelming. And we'll talk about that more specifically here in just a second. But the young players that also got hurt lost important playing time. So literally the injuries did decimate this team they did decimate this team, which is something to me noted. But when you're an injured football team, 3-14, that's not an excuse. I mentioned this with the what was it? Which team that I talked about recently with their injuries? Oh, it was the New Orleans Saints. New Orleans Saints, they had a lot of injuries on their team, but they went 5-12 and they lost 7 straight games after starting really hot in week 2, which, by the way, if you want to go check that out, you can go ahead and I'm going to throw a card up there to go check that one out. I had a really cool rant at the end about Mickey Loomis not being the guy for the future, and that the Saints will not get better until they figure out their cap situation. But that's over there. That's not here. Anyways, when you are a 3-14 team, I'm not blaming injuries as a forefront for why it is. It's a factor that has to be stated, but that is not the biggest reason why this team went 3-14. This team was already not good on paper, and injuries just made them that much worse, and that is the result that happened. But now we'll actually talk about it more in depth here. The defensive line was straight up underwhelming. Here's the thing. Dexter Lawrence only played a handful of games. He only played 9 games and had 9 sacks. He was having a monster year before he got hurt. I don't want to take anything away from Dexter, because Dexter Lawrence was not the problem on this defensive line. This man was proving this year why he's arguably the best defensive tackle in the NFL. And right now, I think Dexter Lawrence is better than Chris Jones. I think he is. His numbers are better. You look at the tape, and the tape shows that he is a very impactful player. Of course, Chris Jones obviously gets the nod because he's on the Chiefs and they're a winning organization compared to the Giants. But Dexter Lawrence is a top 3 defensive tackle in football right now. And this year, he was having a career year. He was going off, and then he got hurt. And then dominoes began to fall more after that. But also, Kayvon Thibodeau, he only played 12 games. But even when he was on the field, Kayvon Thibodeau was a nothing burger. He was not good at all in 2024. Simply not. For a 5th overall pick, he simply just completely underwhelmed. And then later on in the year, he was talking about how players that are the best on their team should have a more say on the team. It was at the time, I can't remember when I talked about it. It was during the regular season, but the comment was very immature. It was very selfish, not team oriented at all. And I'm sorry, if you're one of the best playmakers on your team, well, you're not. I'm sorry, you have the talent, but he was not. So the fact that he said that, people clowned on him because it made him sound like a hypocrite. Because he's the one making that comment, but he wasn't playing like one of the best players on the team and was really not playing all that well. And then Brian Burns, he simply wasn't that great. Obviously, the injuries hurt, but I will say when he was on the field, he didn't get a lot of the big stats like sacks, tackles for loss. But you look at pass rush win rate, you look at the advanced metrics, Brian Burns did provide an impact. There's definitely, if you look at the tape and you look at those metrics like I mentioned, Brian Burns did play well. Although the numbers didn't show, of course, that doesn't help when Kayvon Thibodeau is doing nothing and Dexter Lawrence is on the bench because he's on injured reserve because he's hurt. So there's only so much that one guy can do. But either way, the whole defensive line, because of the injuries, because of the poor play on the field, it was just terrible. It was just underwhelming. And this was supposed to be the best part of their team, was this defensive line. And quite frankly, ended up being one of their worst parts. Granted, a lot of it was bad. Everything was bad for the New York Giants except for a couple people. So there's really not much more blame pie to go around. But there you go. The injuries and the defensive line overall just simply did not perform up to expectations. 5th, outside of Malik Neighbors and Tyrone Tracy, and we can put Wan'Dale Robinson in the conversation because he had 93 catches. But honestly, man, I'm only putting him there just out of pity, honestly. But outside of those 3 guys, there's literally no one on offense that did anything. Theo Johnson, I like Theo Johnson, the rookie tight end out of Penn State. He showed some nice things, but simply didn't get on the field enough for me to really find anything truly notable from his production. And everyone else literally did nothing. Devin Singletary did nothing. The quarterbacks did nothing. Right, the rest of the receivers, Darius Slayton, let me look at his stats real quick if you don't mind. He had 39 catches, 573 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did almost nothing. So honestly, what is there to talk about with this offense? This offense was so bad that when the starters were even on the field, they were not good. They were not good at all, and I get it. A lot of that has to do with Daniel Jones, because Daniel Jones is not a good quarterback, and when you don't have a good quarterback, your offense is not going to be good. But at the same time, there's got to be something here other than Malik Neighbors and Tyrone Tracy has to provide something, and they didn't. They simply did not provide anything. So that, along with everything else on this list, that really did not help. And then the last one, coaching, which is awful. No one really improved. They never could get out of their own way. From week 1 to week 18, this is one of those teams that was bad from start to finish, straight up, and that goes to coaching. If there's no improvement, there's one person, one group of people that's supposed to be responsible for a team getting better, and that is coaching. And when you don't have a team that gets better, guess what that is? That is a coaching problem. So with all that being said, what now? What can the Giants do to get better? So to me, we'll start with the big three. The big three positions that this team needs are quarterback, offensive line, and then I put wide receiver / defensive back together, and I'll explain why in a second. Quarterback. Obviously, you don't have a quarterback, so you either got to sign one in free agency, trade for one, or draft one. And right now, apparently the New York Giants are front runners for trading for Matthew Stafford. If you trade for Matthew Stafford, he's going to want a new contract. That would be a big mistake, honestly. And for the Rams, when we talk about the Rams, I think a little bit of I'm going to stop for a second and just kind of go off on a tangent. I'm sorry. Maybe not a tangent, but on a little bit of a skewed path. Next week, I am going to make a regular podcast episode for you guys because there's some news that's broken out and I kind of want to talk about it. So predictions versus reality will continue like normal, and then we'll have a regular podcast episode next week. So keep an eye out for that, where we'll talk more about the Matthew Stafford situation. But going back to the Giants side of things, I think if you trade for Matthew Stafford, that's going to be a big mistake. Because if you trade for Matthew Stafford and give him a big contract like he's wanting for, and giving up the draft capital that you're going to have to give up to get him, the Giants are not in a position to make that move. They're not. They're simply not. They're too bad. They have too many holes. You cannot be sacrificing a lot of money and also a lot of draft capital to get a 37-year-old Matthew Stafford. So that leaves one option for me, or two options, which is to get a veteran quarterback, which, hey, Jameis Winston has said he wants to play for the Giants. So, hey, make that happen. Jameis Winston, at least he'll make the team more interesting. So there's that. And then the other one is to draft a quarterback. So, in my opinion, you're going to have to trade up and get one, because with the Titans having a need at quarterback, with the Browns having a need at quarterback, you can't risk not having the choice of who you want between Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. So now there's rumors that Tennessee is going to pick Abdul Carter at 1, which if they do would be a huge mistake. If there's a trade available, if there's a trade available, you got to take the trade. And I think the trade would be the New York Giants trading up to number 1 to get their quarterback. So that's a big need that they got to fix, obviously. And then the next one is offensive line. The offensive line, early on before players got hurt, was bad, but they weren't awful. I mentioned as going into back in my predictions video that they didn't sign stars, they signed starters, which is an improvement considering that the offensive line in 2022 or 2023 was god awful, a historically bad offensive line. But with the injuries, it simply didn't matter. And the thing is, you need a new right tackle. Andrew Thomas, the left tackle, is good, but Evan Neal, the dude's busted out. Either you got to find a trade him or just cut him. Figure out what you're going to do, because right tackle it's just going to be a big hole. The interior, you sign some quality starters. You sign starters, not stars. So maybe you keep them and keep the continuity there, which fine, I can get behind. But you got to draft an impact player somewhere, whether it's guard, tackle, maybe if you get a center in one of the later rounds, maybe. But definitely offensive line needs to be addressed, because it was a killer this year. Not as bad as 2023, but it was still very, very bad. And then the third one being wide receiver / DB. I put them together because both of these position groups for this team are in similar spots where they have players on this group. You look at receivers, Malik Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson, who's second-round pick, Darius Slayton, who's been there forever, Jalen Hyatt was a third-round pick out of Tennessee. Remember, he won the Biletnikoff Award when his final year there, right? And then you have the DBs, which you have Adoree Jackson, the veteran corner, who's played pretty solid for them. First round pick Deonte Banks, who really hasn't panned out, but hey, still first round pick. You can make that argument. And then you drafted Drew Phillips, who was your starting nickel for the majority of the year, right? So, and then you also drafted Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota, who played pretty well, in my opinion. But these guys, like, they have players, like notable players at these two position groups, but they need to add something else to one of these two spots to give it some juice. My opinion, it's probably going to be DB to help out the secondary and help out this defensive line, because that's the better side of the ball for the Giants on paper. So maybe they go there, but also I could see them picking a receiver on day 2, right? I could see like a Trey Harris, a Savion Williams, a Xavier Restrepo, right? Like one of those guys, an Isaiah Bond, right? Like one of those guys, Tez Johnson, even, like as more people pop into my head, right? Like one of those guys could be taken by the Giants to help give them some juice, because Jalen Hyatt simply has not been good enough. He simply hasn't developed well. Darius Slayton, he's just a 500 to 700 yard guy. He's not a big time playmaker. Wan'Dale Robinson has been disappointing, and I'm still not very high on him right now. And then Malik Neighbors is otherworldly. So yeah, he's great, but they need someone else to provide some solid production for this team, either at those two positions. But honestly, I could see them doing both. But these three positions just need to be taken on day 1 and day 2 in the draft and really be tackled head on if this team wants to really improve. And the thing is, they have, to conclude this here, the offense and defense on both sides, they do have pieces to work with. But honestly, bringing Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen back is just going to hold this team back, and I don't expect to see massive improvement. I think after the year that you had, you fire Schoen, you fire Daboll, you start fresh, you have the 3rd overall pick, maybe you trade up to go get a quarterback, right, and restart and you have a fresh beginning. But they're not doing that, and now you're in a situation where Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll are going to be fired if they don't improve, and that's not a situation you want to bring a rookie quarterback into. But it looks like they're going to be drafting a rookie quarterback more than likely. So yeah, that's a recipe for disaster. And at most, this team's going to win 7 games. I'm calling it right now. They're at most going to win 7 games. And even then, that's a huge, huge stretch. And it's going to cost them because, like I mentioned, they needed to go in a new direction and they chose to stay the same, which is not going to work. So I'll admit that there is an avenue for the New York Giants to improve and get better. But the years upon years of dysfunction really do not convince me that it'll actually happen anytime soon, really. And so I'm going to keep the door slightly cracked just to keep an open mind. But for me and for a bunch of Giants fans that hold out hope, well, it won't take much for this door to be completely closed and probably locked for good for a very long time. But with that all being said, that is going to do it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching / listening today to the Shumake Take. If you guys want to be a Shumake Take fan, first off, make sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button. Pressing those 2 buttons helps the channel out tremendously and helping me grow and spread my football passion to more and more people on the platform. Make sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below of where you think the Giants are going to end up in 2025. Way too early predictions, of course. Let me know, who do you think they're going to draft? If they want to draft a quarterback, do you think you want Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward? Let me know your thoughts there. And ultimately, make sure you also share the video, whether it's by social media or by word of mouth. Make sure you get everybody locked in and locked on to the Shumake Take podcast, coming out with great content for you guys every single week. Once again, thank you guys for watching. I will see you all next time.